Skill 1. Food preservation without electricity. Your grandmother knew this completely. It was not a hobby or a special interest. It was the way food was managed, the harvest preserved for winter, the summer abundance extended through the cold months that produced nothing. The techniques she used have not become less effective, they have simply become less practiced. Canning, the heat processing of food in sealed glass jars that destroys the microorganisms responsible for spoilage and creates a vacuum seal that prevents recontamination. The process that has preserved food safely for over 200 years still works, still effective, still requiring nothing more than jars, lids, a large pot of boiling water, and the knowledge of processing times and safety protocols. The safety knowledge matters. Botulism, the primary safety concern in home canning, is a real risk in low-acid foods processed incorrectly. Pressure canning for low-acid foods, water bath canning for high-acid foods. These distinctions are not optional. They are the difference between safe preserved food and a dangerous one. Fermentation, the transformation of food by beneficial bacteria and yeast that simultaneously preserves it and dramatically increases its nutritional value. Sauerkraut, kimchi, lacto-fermented vegetables, sourdough, kombucha, kefir, these are not health food trends. They are the food preservation technologies that kept European and Asian populations healthy through winters for centuries. They require nothing beyond the food itself, salt, water, and a vessel. The bacteria that perform the fermentation are naturally present on the food surfaces. Dehydration, the removal of moisture that allows microorganisms to grow. Sun drying, salt drying, smoke drying, the techniques that preserved meat and fish and fruit across civilizations before refrigeration. A modern food dehydrator is useful but not necessary. A sunny day with good airflow and the knowledge of safe drying times and temperatures produces the same result. Root cellaring, the use of the Earth's stable temperature to extend the storage life of root vegetables, apples, and certain other produce. A root cellar maintains temperatures between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round in most climates without any electricity. The food stored in it lasts for months beyond what it would last at room temperature. These skills together constitute a complete food preservation system, one that your grandmother used as ordinary kitchen practice, one that the industrial food preservation system has made temporarily unnecessary, one that becomes immediately relevant if that industrial system is disrupted. Skill 2. Medicinal plant knowledge and wound care. Your grandmother knew things about plants that no modern pharmaceutical marketing budget has any incentive to remind you of. Not in the mystical or pseudoscientific sense. In the documented, historically validated, pharmacologically understood sense of plants that contain compounds with genuine medical activity. Yarrow for wound care. Yarrow has been used to stop bleeding and prevent wound infection across cultures for thousands of years. The active compounds, including achilline and azulene, have documented hemostatic and antimicrobial properties. It grows wild across most of North America and is easy to identify and use. Plantain, the common weed that grows in every lawn, not the banana relative, has documented antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties. Applied as a poultice to insect stings, minor wounds, and skin irritations, it provides relief and reduces infection risk. Your grandmother probably called it a weed. She also probably knew how to use it. Elderberry for immune support, documented in multiple clinical studies as having genuine antiviral activity. Your grandmother likely made elderberry syrup or elderberry wine as a winter health practice. The practice was not superstition. It was observed efficacy over generations of use. Wound care beyond plants, the basic wound management skills that prevent minor injuries from becoming life-threatening infections. Cleaning, irrigation, assessment of infection signs, wound closure decisions, dressing changes. The skills that a competent adult in your grandmother's era possessed as ordinary knowledge and that the availability of immediate professional medical care has made unnecessary to develop personally. Skill 3. Navigation without technology. Your grandmother could find her way without GPS, without a map application, without a device of any kind. Not because she was exceptional, because navigation without technology was simply a skill that competent adults possessed. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. At solar noon in the northern hemisphere, it is due south. The shadow of a vertical stick at solar noon points due north. These simple facts allow basic directional orientation in any clear weather conditions without any equipment whatsoever. Stars, the North Star Polaris, sits almost exactly over the geographic North Pole. It does not rise or set. It stays in the same position in the sky while all other stars rotate around it. Finding it by locating the Big Dipper and following the pointer stars at the end of the cup is a skill that has guided human beings across continents and oceans for thousands of years. It still works. It works exactly the same way it always has. Terrain navigation, the ability to read a landscape and understand the relationship between what you see and where you are. Water flows downhill. Following water leads to civilization in most temperate landscapes. Ridgelines run in consistent directions. Valleys and watersheds have predictable relationships. These navigational principles require no equipment. They require observation and the knowledge of how to interpret what you observe. Map reading, the ability to translate between a physical map and a physical landscape, to orient a map with the terrain, to calculate distances and estimate travel times, to identify features on a map in the landscape around you. This is a learnable skill. It requires practice. It was ordinary competence in your grandmother's era, and it is a dying skill in ours. Skill 4. Weather reading from natural signs. Your grandmother looked out the window and knew what the weather was going to do. Not with perfect accuracy, but with the practical accuracy that allows you to make informed decisions about outdoor activities and travel and agricultural work without waiting for a forecast that may not be available. Red sky at morning, sailor take warning. This is not folk superstition. It is atmospheric science expressed in folk language. A red sunrise indicates moisture and dust in the atmosphere to the east, the direction weather typically comes from, which often precedes rain or storms. Cloud reading. Cirrus clouds, the high wispy mare's tails, often precede a weather system by 24 to 48 hours. Cumulonimbus clouds, the towering anvil-topped thunderheads, indicate severe weather within hours or less. Altocumulus clouds in a mackerel pattern often indicate a warm front and coming precipitation. These are not complicated observations. They are pattern recognition that your grandmother learned from her grandmother and practiced continuously. Wind direction and behavior. Wind shifting from south to west to north typically indicates a passing storm system and improving weather in the northern hemisphere. Wind shifting from north to east to south often indicates deteriorating weather approaching. Sudden calm after persistent wind often precedes the most severe weather of a storm system. Plant and animal behavior as weather indicators. Certain plants close their flowers before rain. Certain birds fly low before storms. Cattle tend to lie down before prolonged rainfall. These are not guaranteed predictors, but they are behavioral patterns that accumulate over time into a probabilistic weather assessment capability that does not require any technology to apply. Skill 5. Seed saving and soil management. Your grandmother did not buy seeds every year. She saved them from the best specimens of each variety, selected over generations for the specific conditions of her specific place, building seed stock that was adapted to her local soil and climate in ways that commercially produced seed cannot be adapted. Seed saving is not complicated. It requires understanding the reproductive biology of the plants you are saving, which plants are self-pollinating and therefore safe to save from individual specimens, which plants cross-pollinate and therefore require isolation or selection protocols to maintain variety integrity. Tomatoes are self-pollinating. Save seeds from your best fruits, ferment them briefly to remove the germination-inhibiting gel, dry them thoroughly, and store in a cool, dark place. Next year, those seeds produce plants genetically identical to the parent. Squash cross-pollinate promiscuously. Saving squash seeds requires either growing only one variety or hand-pollinating to ensure variety integrity. More complicated, but entirely doable. Soil management, the knowledge of how to maintain and improve soil fertility without commercial inputs. Your grandmother composted everything: kitchen scraps, garden waste, animal manure. The organic matter returned to the soil that had produced it. The fertility maintained in a cycle that required no external inputs. Green manures, cover crops grown not for harvest, but for incorporation into the soil. Clover and vetch fix nitrogen from the air and release it into the soil when incorporated. Rye and buckwheat add organic matter and suppress weeds. Your grandmother's crop rotation was not just about disease management. It was about soil fertility management in a system that did not depend on industrial fertilizer. These skills together represent agricultural independence, the ability to maintain food production across seasons and years without purchasing either seeds or soil amendments, the foundation of genuine food security that no stockpile can fully substitute. Skill 6. Textile repair and basic garment construction. Your grandmother could sew, not as a hobby, as a necessity. In a world before fast fashion, before the industrial textile supply chain that currently produces clothing so cheaply that most people discard rather than repair, clothing was an investment maintained over years and decades through skilled repair. Darning, the weaving repair of worn fabric that extends the life of socks, elbows, and knees indefinitely. The skill that has been entirely lost in most modern households. A darned sock is not a patched sock. The darning weaves new thread through the remaining fabric structure, distributing wear rather than covering it. Done correctly, a darned garment can be indistinguishable from the original. Patching, the reinforcement and repair of worn or damaged fabric sections. Applied correctly, a patch extends the life of a garment by years. The specific technique matters. A patch applied on top of worn fabric has different durability characteristics than a patch applied beneath the fabric, with the original surface maintained. Basic seam repair, the ability to resew failed seams, to replace buttons correctly and durably, to repair zippers, to alter garments for fit as the wearer's body changes. These are the maintenance skills that extend the useful life of clothing indefinitely in a world where replacement is not available. Basic garment construction from fabric, the ability to sew a functional garment from cloth, not a fashion garment, a functional one, a shirt, a skirt, a pair of trousers, from a pattern or from measurement and improvised pattern making. Your grandmother likely learned this as a child. It is now taught in almost no schools. Skill 7. Animal husbandry at the small scale. Your grandmother likely kept chickens, possibly a milk cow or a few goats, perhaps rabbits or pigs or a combination. The skills of small-scale animal husbandry represent a food security capability of the first order. Animals convert materials that humans cannot eat, grass, insects, kitchen scraps, into materials that humans can. Eggs, milk, meat. The caloric and nutritional density of animal products supplements plant-based food production in ways that purely plant-based systems cannot replicate without significant agricultural complexity. Chicken keeping, the most accessible of the small livestock skills. Chickens require minimal space. They convert kitchen scraps and garden waste into high-quality protein in the form of eggs. They provide meat. They provide fertilizer for the garden. A small flock of 6 laying hens produces approximately 4 to 6 eggs daily, more than enough for household consumption with surplus for trade. The knowledge requirements are modest: housing that protects from predators and weather, feeding and watering management, basic health assessment and common disease recognition, egg incubation for flock replacement if a rooster is present. Goats for milk. Goats are more manageable than dairy cattle and produce milk of high quality and nutritional value. A single productive dairy goat provides 1 to 2 gallons of milk daily. The milk can be consumed fresh or processed into cheese, yogurt, and butter. The skills of dairy processing that your grandmother knew as ordinary kitchen competence. These animal husbandry skills require space and initial investment, but for households with the capacity, they represent the most direct and reliable pathway to animal protein independence. Skill 8. Water sourcing and purification beyond modern methods. Your grandmother knew where the water was. Not the tap, the actual water, the spring on the hillside, the shallow well in the yard, the rain barrel at the corner of the barn, the creek at the edge of the property. The water that existed independently of any infrastructure, and that could be accessed and made safe by the methods she knew. Spring identification. Natural springs occur where groundwater pressure forces water to the surface. They appear on hillsides, at the bases of slopes, and at the edges of geological formation changes. The vegetation around springs is distinctive. Watercress, rushes, and certain mosses grow in spring-fed areas where they do not grow in surrounding dry terrain. Your grandmother knew how to read this vegetation as a water indicator. Well construction at the basic level. The driven well. A pipe with a pointed perforated tip driven into the ground until it reaches the water table, with a hand pump attached. A skill that requires specific knowledge of local geology and some physical effort, but no specialized equipment beyond the pipe, the point, and the pump. In appropriate geological conditions, a driven well can be installed by 2 people with hand tools in a day. Rainwater collection, the simplest and most controllable freshwater source. A clean roof area, a gutter, a downspout directed into a sealed collection barrel. The rain that falls on your roof is clean water. Collected before it touches anything contaminated, it is safe for most uses and requires only basic treatment for drinking. Your grandmother collected rainwater as ordinary practice. The barrel at the corner of the house was not decorative. Purification beyond the modern filter. Boiling, solar disinfection, wood ash water filtration. The methods that your grandmother's grandmother used and that are still effective when modern filtration systems are not available. The knowledge of improvised purification that works with materials available in any environment. Skill 9. Basic construction and repair. Your grandmother's household fixed things. Not called someone to fix things, fixed them. The roof leak, the failed fence, the broken window, the damaged floor, The structural maintenance of the physical environment that the household depended on was performed by the household's own members with the household's own knowledge and tools. Roofing assessment and basic repair. The ability to identify damage to a roof structure and perform the repairs that prevent minor damage from becoming catastrophic. The replacement of individual shingles, the sealing of penetrations around vents and chimneys, the repair of flashing failures. Skills that most modern homeowners have entirely outsourced, and that without professional service availability would leave critical shelter exposed to weather damage. Plumbing basics, the understanding of how water moves through a building, how to shut off water supply when a pipe fails, how to diagnose and address simple plumbing failures, how to manage without indoor plumbing when the system is not functional, the knowledge that your grandmother carried as ordinary household competence. Masonry, basic brick and stonework, the construction and repair of chimneys, fireplaces, walls and foundations using fired clay brick, stone and mortar. Skills that allow the construction and maintenance of thermal mass heating systems that do not require fuel delivery infrastructure. Carpentry beyond simple furniture assembly, the ability to cut, join and finish wood into functional structures. Shelving, flooring repair, window and door installation and repair, the structural maintenance of a wooden building. Your grandfather likely had these skills as ordinary competence. They are now specialty trades. Skill 10, community organization and conflict resolution. This is the most overlooked skill on the list, and in many ways the most important. Your grandmother knew how to build community, not as a social skill in the modern sense of networking, as a survival infrastructure. The barn raising, the harvest bee, the quilting circle, the canning party, these are not charming historical customs. They are the social technologies of a pre-industrial world where complex tasks required more labor than a single household could provide, and where the exchange of that labor was organized by community rather than by market. Your grandmother knew how to organize people toward collective tasks, how to divide labor by capability, how to manage the social tensions that arise when people work together under stress, how to maintain community cohesion across the disagreements and personality conflicts that inevitably occur in any group of people sharing resources and effort. These skills have not been needed in the same way since the infrastructure economy made it possible to accomplish most tasks with purchased services rather than community labor. But the underlying social intelligence, the ability to build trust, manage conflict, allocate roles by capability, and maintain group cohesion under stress, is the most critical resource in any extended crisis scenario. The communities that survive extended crisis are consistently, in the research literature, the communities with the strongest social infrastructure before the crisis arrives, not the communities with the most gear, the communities with the deepest relationships and the most practiced collective problem-solving. Your grandmother was building the infrastructure at every barn raising and harvest bee and quilting circle she attended. She knew that survival was a community project. The modern world has almost forgotten that. Consider for a moment what your grandmother's world actually looked like. Before the supermarket, before the pharmacy, before the hardware store with its staff of specialists available by appointment, before the search engine that answers every practical question instantly, before the supply chain that delivers anything you can imagine to your door in 2 days. Your grandmother woke up in a world where the gap between what she needed and what she could produce herself was much smaller than the gap you live in today. She grew some of her food. She preserved most of what she grew. She treated minor medical issues with what she had available. She fixed what broke rather than replacing it. She made some of her own clothing. She knew where the water was. She knew what the weather was going to do. She could find her way without a device. She was not a superhero. She was not a survivalist. She was an ordinary person living in a world where ordinary competence included most of the 10 skills on this list. And here is the thing about that world that the modern narrative often misses. It was not worse. Different, harder in some respects, without the comfort and convenience and medical capability and communication ability that the modern world provides. But the people who lived in it were not miserable. They were not helpless. They were competent. They were capable. They had the particular kind of confidence that comes from knowing that you can meet your own basic needs with your own hands and knowledge. There is a word for that confidence. The psychologists call it self-efficacy, the belief in your own ability to accomplish what is required of you. Research consistently shows that high self-efficacy correlates with better mental health outcomes, greater resilience under stress, and higher life satisfaction across cultures and circumstances. Your grandmother had it because she had earned it, through the daily practice of the skills that this documentary describes. The modern convenience economy has, as one of its quiet costs, reduce the self-efficacy of the people who live within it. Not because convenience is bad, because the transfer of competence from individuals to systems, while enormously efficient, comes with the loss of the felt capability that competence provides. The 10 skills in this documentary are not just survival tools, they are self-efficacy tools, the practices that build the knowledge and the confidence of a person who knows they can handle what comes. Your grandmother had that. The question is whether you will choose to develop it. We started with a cat, staring at something invisible, using capabilities it was built with, continuously, without interruption, without allowing the comfort of a warm house and regular meals to atrophy the perception and the instinct that its ancestors developed across millions of years. Your grandmother is the human equivalent. Not in her biology, in her practice, in her daily exercise of the capabilities that human beings were built with across hundreds of thousands of years of self-sufficient living, the capabilities that the modern infrastructure economy has made temporarily unnecessary but has not eliminated, the capabilities that sit dormant in the cultural inheritance you received and that can be awakened by practice. The cat does not practice its night vision, it simply uses it, it is biological. The 10 skills in this documentary are cultural rather than biological. They require practice to develop, but the capacity is there, it has always been there, it was fully expressed in your grandmother and in every generation before her. It is available to you. The specific framing of this documentary, your grandmother knew this, is not nostalgic. It is not a statement that the past was better than the present. It is a reminder that the knowledge exists, that it was transmitted successfully across hundreds of generations, that it is documented and accessible and learnable by any person who decides to learn it. The infrastructure that makes these skills temporarily unnecessary is real and valuable, and we are fortunate to have it. But it is a system. And systems have conditions under which they function and conditions under which they do not. The history of human civilization is the history of systems functioning and failing and being rebuilt. The people who contribute to rebuilding are the people who retain some of the knowledge that predated the system that failed. Your grandmother was building that knowledge, not for a collapse that she expected, as ordinary competence, as the natural state of a capable adult in her world. The 10 skills, canning and fermentation, medicinal plant knowledge, navigation, weather reading, seed saving, textile repair, animal husbandry, water sourcing, construction and community building, are the beginning of recovering that ordinary competence. Not completing it, beginning it. Each skill takes time to develop. Each requires practice in real conditions rather than theoretical knowledge. Each becomes more valuable with repetition and refinement. Each builds on the others in ways that create a cumulative resilience greater than any individual skill represents. The cat has been practicing since birth, it has never stopped. Your grandmother practiced her whole life, she never stopped either. The question this documentary leaves you with is the simplest one it could ask. When do you start? Not for the collapse, not for the crisis, for the same reason your grandmother practiced. Because competence in the basic skills of human existence is its own reward, because knowing that you can preserve food and find water and navigate and treat a wound, and read the weather is a form of freedom that no system of convenience can fully provide. The cat stares at the wall. Your grandmother canned her tomatoes. Both of them are doing the same thing. Staying connected to what they were built to do. When do you start?